Hello and welcome back. This is the week 14 lecture. So we are continuing to work with argumentative writing. I hope we sort of got started, at least thinking about essay 4 back in week 13 before Thanksgiving break. I sort of told you guys to get started with a few easy early sort of preliminary steps. So we are choosing an essay from 50 essays, and we are essentially responding to it. So like I said last week, I want you to choose an essay, any essay in the book that strikes your interest. It can be something that we read, something that I've assigned, or something that we haven't looked at as a class. But simply choose an essay, read it, and make sure that you identify the topic of the essay, just what it's about. That's usually pretty easy to determine. And then also identify the argument that the essay is making. So like I was saying, some of these essays are classified as argumentative essays. So you can certainly start there. But essentially, any essay here is making an argument. You can certainly make the case that any essay has an argument or at least an overall point or purpose that the author is trying to achieve. So once you identify it, you need to decide if you agree with it or if you disagree with it. Are you going to support the author's position on that topic, or are you going to disagree with the author and take a position of your own? So hopefully you guys have been able to complete some of those steps. I hope by now you have selected an essay and identified the topic and the argument or the thesis of that essay. So this week I want to talk about next steps. And what we really need to be working on here in week 14, really two things, outlining and researching. Those are the two areas we need to focus on. So I want to talk about both today. So I've already posted a sample outline to the week 14 module. So I would like you guys to take a look at those, to take a look at that when you get the chance. We're not going to go through it word for word here, but I just want to go over a few basic things about the intro paragraph and about body paragraph. So we've been outlining throughout the semester. I think by now we understand, what an outline is and why we do it, why they are useful. But this essay, remember, is longer and more complex than our previous essay. So it's even more important here to outline, to have a clear plan, a blueprint for our paper so that we can meet all of the requirements and make strong, well-developed, well-supported arguments. So we'll talk a little bit about the outline. We'll walk through the sample that I've already posted. And then also I want to talk about research because this is something new for us. None of our previous essay assignments included any sort of research component. So that's something that makes essay 4 different. So this is not only an argumentative paper, it's an argumentative research paper. So we are finding sources. Each one of you needs to have two sources, two outside sources that you found through research. And I know we can all find websites on Google, and sometimes that can be somewhat helpful, but I want us to move beyond just basic Google searches, and I want us to find better sources, more reliable, more credible, just more packed with information, more helpful. And remember, the way we need to look at sources, the way we need to look at research is simple. We do research in order to find more evidence for our claims. We should be developing claims of our own, like I've been talking about. Once you know what topic you're writing about, identify your position, figure out what you think, how you feel, where do you fall in the debate that's going on around that topic. What is your position? Once you know that, you need to start developing original claims. You're not only going to have that big central claim that's going to function as your thesis, you're also going to have a lot of supporting claims, related claims, claims that are obviously connected to that thesis, but they are going to support that thesis. They are going to give you a chance to develop your argument in more detail. But for all of those claims, you need reasons and you need evidence to go along with those claims. Just like we talked about a couple of weeks ago, the basic argumentative structure that we all know. We have claims at the top, which are simply debatable statements, not obviously true statements, but debatable or controversial statements that not everybody is necessarily going to agree with. And then in support of those claims, we're going to have reasons that we can often generate ourselves, and then we're going to find evidence, largely through research, that will also serve to support the claim. So we all should probably get that basic structure by now. I think we already understood it before we discussed it in class. So with research, we're simply looking for the evidence that we need in order to really develop and strengthen our argument over the course of our papers. So you need to look at the sources that you use as supplements. They are there to help you make your argument. They are not there to make the argument for you. And that's a mistake that some students make with this assignment. They feel like they can just, repeat an argument made by a source, made by an expert or, an author that they find over the course of their online searching. You can use that stuff, and it's great if that stuff supports your own claims, supports your own position. But you need to have your own original argument really in mind first. And then you find research to support it. And you can also find sources that represent opposing viewpoints, the opposing positions that are against you, the other side of the debate, the other side of the argument. And you can use sources to kind of represent those opposing views, and you can rebut those views. You can push back against them. You can try to disprove them. That's another thing you can do in your papers. So today I want us to kind of get started with our research, or at the very least, I just want to show you guys some easy ways to find reliable academic sources. Again, I know you guys can use Google. I know you can find stuff in a simple Google search. And some of the stuff that you find in a simple Google search, honestly, will be potentially helpful, but not everything is. And that's the danger of just doing a general search. You're going to find some good sites, but you're also going to find a lot of unhelpful stuff, a lot of garbage that kind of gets in the way and might distract you, and you might go down some wrong paths. So we're going to take what we already know about performing basic Google searches, and we're just going to apply those already existing skills to a few additional methods or avenues of finding sources. So I want to talk about Google Scholar, and then I want to talk a little bit about the GBC library databases, which we all have access to, and they're all free to use for any GBC student. All you need to do is visit the library homepage, and I just want to walk you guys through some easy steps that will allow you to access those databases, and those databases will enable you to find really good sources. But let's just start with the outline very quickly. Like I said, we don't need to go through it point by point, but just remember the basic structure that we've been sort of utilizing throughout the semester. We need a strong intro where we establish our topic. You need to introduce your topic and the essay that you've chosen from our book. You still need that opening hook as well. You need to grab our interest. You need to make readers want to read on. That's been true, really, of all of our essays. And then, of course, the final thing you need to do in the intro is establish your thesis. And we really need to make sure that we have our own original thesis statement. This means your argument, your overall point. Now, remember, a good thesis statement can include what we call a plan of development. You guys may have heard that term in a previous English class. You can think of this as sort of a roadmap or like a signpost, a guide that will pretty much tell readers all of the major claims that you're going to be making in your body paragraph. So I think I put in this week's module, it might have been in last week's module as well, an example of a thesis that contains a plan of development. So if you look in the week 14 overview, you'll see two different kinds of thesis statements. They're both acceptable, they're both pretty good, but one's a little bit more broad and general. It just kind of lays out the basic argument that the student's going to make. And then the other one includes a plan of development where that basic argument is still stated, but on top of that, the author provides the main three supporting points or claims that are going to be developed in the bodies. So you add those supporting claims up, and you basically get the thesis proven and developed in those bodies. So if you want to include a plan of development, that can often be helpful not only for your readers, but also for you, especially if you're writing these paragraphs in order. Now keep in mind that you don't have to. Not everybody writes their paragraphs in order from start to finish. I tend to do it. A lot of people do it, but it doesn't matter. At some point, you're going to write that intro paragraph. And if you have the plan of development sort of spelled out in your thesis, you'll know exactly what you need to cover in your bodies. So then you can check your bodies at some point based on what you have there in the intro paragraph in your thesis statement, and you can make sure that you're covering all of your big supporting claims. So that's pretty much it for the intro, and then I'm showing you guys just the basic body paragraph structure that you can use and reuse throughout the essay. So don't forget to begin with a topic sentence. You need to start pretty much every body that you write with some kind of a topic sentence that is announcing what that body is going to be about. So what I recommend is that you build these bodies around your big supporting points or claims. So like I said, if you're developing a lot of claims about your topic, things that tie into your overall thesis, if you have a good handful of those, maybe 4, maybe 5, now you can start building bodies around those claims and simply write topic sentences that announce those claims. And that's how you can begin these bodies. And then you have to start getting into more detail and actually developing the claim. So how do you do that? Well, 2 main ways. Number 1, think about the methods of development that we've been using all semester. It's very important that you guys don't forget about narration, description, analysis, comparison, all of the previous writing styles that we've been practicing and using. I want to see that you guys can incorporate a lot of those into your argumentative papers. There's a lot of reasons why we've been looking at all of those different writing styles, but one of the reasons is so that we can use all of those styles, all of those methods of development here on our biggest essay, our final essay, which is worth the most points. So this is your chance to use a little bit of narrative, to use some analysis, to use some comparison, use these skills that you've been developing over the course of the semester to help you build your body paragraphs. And then the second way that you're going to develop these supporting claims will, of course, be your reasons and your evidence. And in some cases, the evidence and the reasons might be delivered in the form of a narrative, a brief anecdote, perhaps, an extended example that takes the form of a narrative, or you might use some comparison to help you develop reasons and evidence. But you're also going to be using your sources when it comes to the evidence. So you have a lot to do in the bodies. You can use these previous methods of development that we've already learned. You can also develop your own reasons, bring in evidence from sources, and also don't forget about the appeals. Don't forget about artistic and inartistic appeals, like we've been talking about the last couple of weeks. Artistic appeals are created by you. Those are you, the writer. Those are the emotional appeals, pathos, or the logical appeals, logos. Remember that your ethos, that's the ethical appeal, that's based on your credibility, and credibility in turn is based on your knowledge of the topic and your goodwill towards your audience. So you need to be kind of working on all of those throughout your bodies, and then the inartistic appeals largely consist of research, numerical evidence, those testimonials, the words of others. You can often find those through research, whether you're getting expert opinion or the firsthand experiences of regular people. You can often find those in books and articles online, and even graphical evidence, charts, graphs, diagrams, pictures. You can often find those through research as well. So you have plenty to do. This is a longer essay, but you're going to be developing an argument. It's going to be a complex argument. You're going to have multiple claims to develop in your bodies, and you have a lot to do with each claim when it comes to those methods of development and the reasons and evidence that you're bringing in. So just sort of wash, rinse, and repeat with those body paragraphs. Once you get comfortable with the basic structure that I have in the outline, you just need to keep doing that. You need 4, 5, maybe 6 bodies for a paper like this. I know many times we want to stick with that 5-paragraph model that we probably learned previously, maybe in high school. We've used it before. It's worked before. I get it. And with our first couple of essays, frankly, those 3 to 4 page essays, that 5-paragraph model was probably fine. But the minimum length requirement for essay 4 is 4 pages. So it's a good bit longer even than essay 3, and certainly it's longer than the first 2 essays. So we might need to move beyond that 5-paragraph model, and we know we're going to need an intro, and we know that we need a conclusion, and you can see my concluding paragraph in the outline as well. We're not really there yet. We can talk more about the conclusion next week. But again, push beyond 3 bodies. You're probably going to need more than 3 bodies. Like I said, 4 to 6 is a good range. So make sure you have plenty of good claims, and make sure you can build some paragraphs around those claims. That's really the best way to get organized here, and the best way to create an outline for essay 4. So what I'm hoping is that we're all outlining by maybe the middle of the week. But of course, first, we can engage in some of that pre-writing, that early pre-writing, the idea generation activities that we've been doing throughout the semester, just free writing, clustering, brainstorming. Just get some ideas about your topic. At this stage of the game, a quick Google search just to acquaint yourself with the topic, not necessarily looking for sources, but just looking for general information. That's not a bad idea. Just write down some notes, some thoughts. And like I said last week, make sure you sit down with your essay and annotate it. Be a critical reader. Sit down and read with pen in hand. Mark up that essay, write down questions, underline important passages. If you think you can identify a thesis, underline it. Just underline important ideas or anything that jumps out at you in that essay. And that's kind of how you start the early pre-writing. is by annotating and getting some notes down about the essay itself, and then you can start writing more about the topic. Again, we're using the essay as a jumping off point. We can sort of move beyond it. You don't have to work with it throughout the entire essay. You need to mention it, and you might reference it or talk about it a little bit in some of your bodies, but you can also just move beyond it and talk about the larger topic a little bit more and talk about it from some different perspectives. Bring in additional sources, additional info. So the essay that we're choosing is really just a way to get us started. So once you've annotated that essay, you might just want to start thinking about the topic in bigger terms and your own thoughts and feelings about that topic as you start to develop your own position. So we need to be doing that stuff like now. Today, Monday, the beginning of week 14, do some of that early idea generation stuff, and then the next step is to start drafting your thesis and then outlining. Those are the later pre-writing steps. You need to at least have some idea of your thesis, and I suggest just going ahead and plugging it into your outline. So as you're planning your intro, you might not write in everything. You might not have the opening hook and the introduction of the text and the topic right away, but go ahead and plug in a rough draft of your thesis, a tentative thesis statement. It might not sound exactly the way you want it. It might not be polished and ready to go, but it's a placeholder. It's a way to get your thoughts down on paper, and even if you're going to change it, if you need to continue to work with it, that's fine. You obviously will have time. You just need to get something down and then create an outline. It can look just like mine, it can look a little different, but just make sure you have a plan for an intro paragraph and at least a handful of bodies. And as the week goes on, you can continue to plan additional bodies. And by the end of this week, we need to get started on research. You guys know the semester's almost over, so we have 2 weeks of instruction here in week 14 and then week 15. That's it for regular instruction, and then we have exam week. That's week 16, and that's it. That's the end of the semester. So by next week, week 15, we need to move on to drafting. And I will post my final lecture next week as we're putting together rough drafts. I'll talk a little bit more about drafting next week, and I'll also talk about post-writing as we work on revising and editing towards the end of next week. So this week's all about pre-writing, and we need to have an outline and our research started by the end of this week so we can move on to drafting and post-writing next week. Okay, so I think that's enough about the outline. Ask me questions, email me if you have any questions about the assignment in general or about the assignment or about the outline in particular. But let's go ahead and move on now and talk about research. So I was thinking about doing a little tutorial for you guys where I could actually share my screen and walk you through some of these basic steps, but I don't think I need to do that. It's pretty easy if you just want to follow along with me right now. I can just give you some very simple instructions, and basically all you need to do is go to the GBC library homepage. So if you go to the GBC homepage, one of the tabs up top should be for the library. So you can start by simply clicking on that. And I'll also just call your attention to the tutorials that I have posted to the week 14 module. So you can find those same videos inside the library website, but I went ahead and posted them. So if you do want a more detailed tutorial, a sort of step-by-step process for accessing the databases or the catalog or anything else through the GBC library, I've made those available. You can click on the links and watch those. But really, I just want to talk about 3 things today, just a couple of easy ways to get started on your research, and then I want to talk about the databases just a little bit and show you how to get to them and they're pretty easy to use. But like I was saying earlier, as you're first getting acquainted with your topic, there's nothing wrong with doing a Google search and just kind of combing through some of your top search results and maybe visiting a few websites. Even going to Wikipedia, frankly, at this early stage is fine. Now, you're not going to be able to use Wikipedia as a source, and you're not going to use a lot of the early stuff that you read online as actual research, and that's fine. You're just learning about the topic. That's part of the overall process. So it's fine to just kind of jump around, read a little bit, get familiar, and if there's a good Wikipedia page on your topic, I actually do recommend that you check it out. Now, Wikipedia is an interesting thing. I don't think that it's bad necessarily. We can't rely on it as a source. It's certainly not an academic source because it's an open source, which means that anybody can post information there, and it's not really fact-checked or peer-reviewed. So that makes it hard to always rely on. However, there are a lot of good Wikipedia pages out there. So, for example, I have a student this semester in my other 101 doing climate change. And in class, that's her topic. And in class, we just happened to visit the Wikipedia page for climate change. And there's a lot of good info there. That's a good preliminary step as you're getting acquainted with the topic. You can visit that page and just read some of the stuff there. There's a lot of stuff there. But the best way, the real way to use Wikipedia to your advantage is not necessarily to rely on all of the information because, some of it we don't always know where it comes from, but you can certainly read what's there, and a lot of it for a lot of these scientific topics or these sort of hot button current debate, current issue type topics, there will be good informative pages on them. But what you really need to do is scroll down to the bottom of those pages, and you should see like a works cited page, essentially, often called references or sources, and it's a list of the sources that the author of that page used in making that page. So that's kind of how you can determine if that Wikipedia page is good at all. If it's at all reliable, it's going to have references listed. It's going to have sources, just like our papers will have works cited pages, ultimately. So you can take a look at some of those references. There will often be links to them. So if you just want to sort of practice what I'm talking about, just go to Wikipedia, type in climate change, just as an easy example, because I was just looking at this page a few days ago. Just type it in and take a look. Go down, scroll down to the bottom of the page and see what I'm talking about. There's going to be a bunch of references listed, and some of those links will still work. Not all of them. Some might be old. Depends how old this page is. But a lot of those links will take you directly to the source. It might be a web page, it might be an article available through some publisher or some university, but you're going to have access to a lot of those sources. And that's a good way to find good sources that you can use. You can basically use some of the same sources that the creator of that Wikipedia page used. So you're not using the Wikipedia page itself, you're using the sources that help that person make the page. And again, if that person has a lot of sources and they are good sources, chances are the person who made the page is knowledgeable about the topic, might even work in that field or have some specialized knowledge. But even if they don't, a lot of those sources might be valuable or useful for you. So you can take a look, and on the climate change page, they even have a section for academic or scholarly sources. And that's really what we want. Sometimes we can find some good stuff on websites, but really we want scholarly books and articles when we're putting together research papers, because those are the best kinds of research. those are the kinds of sources that will help us the most when we're supporting our claims. So that's why I want to turn you guys to something very similar to Google, but a little bit better than just using a standard Google search. If you guys can go to Google and search for Google Scholar, you'll notice that it works just like Google. But Google Scholar will give you access to, you guessed it, scholarly sources. Books and articles that are peer-reviewed. And you're going to hear that term a lot, especially as you move on to 102. A peer-reviewed source is good, and the reason is obvious. Peer-reviewed sources are written by experts in the field, doctors, scientists, professors, but then their work gets reviewed, peer-reviewed, kind of like what we've done, maybe what you've done perhaps in the past with your own papers. When you do peer review, that means your peers, your classmates review the work, look at it, see if it works, see how effective it is, and provide you with feedback. So that's what happens with these sources. These articles and books get reviewed by other experts, other people who work in the field. And they sort of get signed off on. They get sort of confirmed as being good, accurate, reliable information. So that just makes them really good sources for us because they've been double checked, they've been verified, they've been reviewed by other people who know. So we can view those sources as very reliable, very credible. And remember, we want to have good credibility. That's part of our ethical appeal. We want to have good credibility as the arguer, as the writer. And one way to really strengthen our credibility is to use good quality sources. So if you just search for your topic in Google Scholar, you're going to get search results just like you would with a normal Google search. But now, instead of just getting a bunch of random stuff, some of which might be good and some might not be, now you're getting scholarly, peer-reviewed search results. So again, you might not, just like on the Wikipedia reference section, you might not have access to every single result that comes up in your search. You can click on some of those links. In some cases, it might take you to a site and it might ask you to, pay money for the article or buy a subscription to some kind of publication. You don't need to do that. You should never pay money for sources. So sometimes it'll be a dead end, but it doesn't take long to click on a link and see if you can maybe access that source. And a lot of them will be available. In many cases, you'll be able to download PDFs, or you might be able to save the file somewhere, and you'll be able to read it, print it, keep it, use it on SA4. So Google Scholar is a great resource. It's easy to use. It's free. Again, not every source that comes up will be accessible to you, but a lot of them will be. And I mean, they'll be accessible for free. And the ones that are there, might as well download them, read them, and use them. So that's another way to get started on your research. And then finally, let's talk about the databases. So like I said, if you just go to the library homepage, just follow me for a few easy steps here. It's really not hard. Once you're on the library homepage, you just need to scroll near the bottom of the page. And you're going to see a few options, like 3 columns of things that you can click on. At the top, it's going to say library card info. Right next to library online catalog, that's sort of the top column. Underneath that, it will say ebooks and databases. That's the second column. And then the third and final column is tutorials and contact us. So for those of you who are not in a GBC service area, we do have a physical library in Elko on our main campus, and we do have a real life librarian who works there. So if you go to the Contact Us tab, you should see a phone number and an email. You can get in touch with Eric, our librarian. He's very helpful. You can also watch some of those tutorials. I've also linked you to them in the week 14 module, but I want us to go back up to that second column and click on databases. You should see databases right next to ebooks. Now you can check out any of these. You can look at ebooks. The online catalog simply means you're searching the entire library catalog for books and articles that we have through GBC that you either have in physical form at the library in Elko or that we have digitally. But all we really need for this assignment will be the databases. So if you click on the databases, that should take you to a new page where you're going to see two things, EBSCO and JSTOR. Those are the two big, most popular, the two biggest, most popular databases for freshman research projects. So those are really the only two that we need. Now you'll notice there's also an alphabetical list of the databases, all of the databases that we have access to. So you can look through those. You can use any of those. But EBSCO and JSTOR are like big depositories. They have a ton of info, and you can search for virtually any topic within those databases, and you're going to find good, scholarly, peer-reviewed academic sources, both articles from magazines, articles from academic journals, articles from newspapers, and you'll also find books, book chapters, all good, valuable sources. So when we're talking about research in here, we need to know sort of what counts as an acceptable source. And I pretty much just named them all. An article from any kind of reputable publication, a newspaper, magazine, even if it's kind of a popular magazine, but it needs to be like a news magazine, not a celebrity gossip entertainment magazine, but something like Time or Newsweek or The Atlantic. So newspapers, magazines, but also academic journals. And you're going to know those when you see them. They're often going to have very official titles, and they're going to be very different kinds of articles. They're often going to be a little bit longer. They're going to be a little bit more dense, maybe a little bit more packed full of information. But those are going to be really good sources because they are, once again, peer-reviewed. They are academic. So again, things like the American Medical Association or the American Psychiatry Association or the social work journal. You're going to see a lot of academic journals if you're looking through these databases. That's not going to be all of the hits that you get, but a lot of them will be academic journals. And you can also modify what types of searches you're conducting. So once you get inside, if you click on EBSCO, once you get inside that database, you can see, again, it works a lot like Google. You just punch your search term into that search bar, but you can also control your search. If you go to your advanced search, you can pick what types of sources you're looking for. You can look for newspaper articles. You can look for magazines. You can look for books. You can also look for articles from academic journals. So you can narrow your search results to just those specific things. You can also narrow your results based on the date of publication when this stuff comes out. So there's lots of things you can play around with. I recommend devoting some time, a couple of hours, to conducting research between Google Scholar and the GBC databases. You should be able to find enough. You only need two. We need two outside sources. And in some cases, if you end up on a certain type of website, an edu website, maybe a .org, some of those can sometimes contain good info, particularly EDUs, because those are the websites of colleges and universities, so we can usually rely on the info we find there. But again, acceptable sources would be articles from magazines, newspapers, or academic journals. Also, certain articles found on the better types of websites, and look through the overview in the week 14 module. I'm listing all of this: .orgs, .edus, .govs, stuff on official government websites, usually pretty reliable, but we don't want .coms. So not all websites are created equal. .coms are commercial websites. They're designed to make money, and they're not as reliable. So read through my website info. I'm telling you what kinds of websites can sometimes work, and then what kinds of websites to avoid. So some websites are good. Those articles I just mentioned are good. And of course, books or chapters or sections within books are also good. So stick to those acceptable sites. We don't want .coms. We don't want social media stuff. We don't want Cliff Notes or the kinds of summary websites that students sometimes use when they don't feel like doing their reading. We don't want any of that. We need credible, reliable sources. So again, use Google Scholar and use those databases, and you're bound to find those good sources that you need. So hopefully you can just kind of get into EBSCO or get into JSTOR and just start looking for information about your topic. Try a few different searches. You can obviously just search for your topic, climate change, cost of higher education, whatever. But if you're not finding quite what you want, you might want to modify your search terms a little bit. And again, look at your search options. When you go to advanced search, look at your options. Look at all the different ways that you can narrow your search based on the types of sources that you're looking for, based on year of publication. We typically want pretty recent sources, stuff that's relatively recent, because information changes. And if we have really old sources, they might be outdated. So we typically want pretty recent. It'd be good to stay within this century, if possible. But look at those different ways to refine your search. Try a few different searches. Don't just grab the first two, search results that come up. Look around, read through some of these. Another thing you'll notice in the databases, and this is often true with Google Scholar as well, if you click on one of your search results, you'll often be able to read what's called an abstract. Before you actually download it or read the entire thing, you might be able to see an abstract. That's like a summary of the source, maybe a paragraph or two, sometimes even shorter, that just gives you an overview of what the source is about. It can be very helpful to read those before you make the decision as to whether or not you're going to read the entire source. Because if it's not going to be helpful, if you're not going to be able to use it, you might as well not waste your time reading and annotating it. So it might be helpful to look at a few abstracts, look through your search results, try a few different searches, and try to have 2 good sources by the end of this week. And if you have an outline and your 2 sources in hand by the end of this week, we can move on to drafting and post writing next week. All right, so email me if you have any questions. And again, if you want, take a look at those tutorials. If you want a little bit more detail, and if you want to see some more of these databases and how to do different kinds of searches, those tutorials are available both in this week's module and on the library homepage. So look around, check out the library homepage, check out Google Scholar, and get in touch with me if you're having any problems finding sources, or if you have any questions about the assignment or about the outline or anything else. Okay, we're getting near the end, so it's very important that you guys communicate with me, because we just don't have a lot of time left. Okay, so I will see you next week for the final lecture of the semester.